Hello everyone, my name is Pavlos. It's nice to be part of React Native EU 2020. So my talk will be about Xcode complexity and how we can avoid this and simplify this for all React Native projects. So let's get started. So my name is Pavlos. You can find me online as Finis. I enjoy using and improving React Native. I've been using that for almost 5 years now. Yeah, it's a great technology and I want to make it even better. What we've noticed is that Xcode has been a struggle for many users, especially coming from web or native Android development. And it's a struggle because it is a new tool and many people are unfamiliar with it. The problem is also that a lot of settings need to be edited from Xcode UI, which is not the easiest. And definitely the file format of the project file is not very Git friendly. So we can see here that this is the UI of Xcode, and when we're trying to edit settings in here, it's not the easiest for a new user. And then when we check the upgrade helper, like here, we can see that there's a lot of text here, not the easiest to comprehend. Many times also the diffs are basically just IDs being changed for the same files. So that's not helping. And of course we see things like this where a block of code or a block of this project file has been moved a few lines below. Again, creating a diff that looks complicated, but really nothing changed. The React Native core team and the community team have been working hard. There have been a lot of improvements and a lot of features shipped the last few years, and the tooling surrounding React Native has been getting better too. The biggest difference was made by adding CocoaPods that made linking basically way easier and simpler for everyone. And then the upgrade helper helped with people doing manual upgrades a little bit easier. So I've had this idea for a while now. I thought it would be very nice if the Xcode project was basically something like the package.json file. And by that I mean have one file where all of the Xcode project is defined, and then we don't have to mess around with settings inside Xcode. Looking for that, I found Xcode Gen. This is a project that already exists, and basically it can take a project YAML file, and using that it can generate the Xcode project file. So basically imagine that the project YAML file is the same as our package.json. So this is the place where we define all of the settings and the options and everything that we want to specify. And then the same way as we run yarn install, we would run Xcode Gen generate, which is the generation function, and then we would get for package.json we would get a yarn log file that we commit, and we don't really care what's in there, but it is what we need when we have the same project in a new computer. And in the same way we would get the project file for Xcode generated for us, and it would be the same or very close to same in a different computer. So the way to set this up for a new project, I have made this repository here that we can see the steps as well, but the steps are basically we need to install two tools. One is the Xcode Gen and the other one is Xunique. The first one is for generating the Xcode project file, and the other one is for making the project file a little bit more consistent, more idempotent for handling the diffs and moving it to a new computer. Then we would have to copy a make script that is very simple, and then just get the project YAML file for our React Native version. A better way to do this is if we do a demo. Let's do that. So like I said, here's the repository. First thing, like I said, we will need to install Xcode Gen. I have this already on my machine. And then the next thing would be to install Xunique. Again, I have it on my machine, so I'll skip these two. So the next is to copy the make file. The make file is up here, and we can see that basically it's just a bash script, very simple. It's creating the main JS bundle file, which is a file that the React Native project is including, but is generating when we run yarn start. So it doesn't exist yet. We create it just so that we can generate the Xcode project, and then we remove it again. Then we run pod install just to make all the CocoaPods and the linking done. And then as a last step, we do Xunique so we can make our project basically easier to commit. So let's do that. I have a demo project here. Let's make sure that it actually runs before we do that. So I will open the demo project in Xcode, and I will run it. So I started the packager here on the left, and I will click play on Xcode. All right. Let's see if that worked. So the build succeeded and it's starting up. This is basically a React Native application that I initialized with 0.62.2, and it's basically the template. I haven't done any changes to that. Yeah, so as we can see, it's basically all here. The only thing that I have changed in the Xcode project is that I have removed the tests and the tvOS part of the application, just to make this whole setup a little bit simpler, but it's not hard to add this as well. All right, so like I said, the next step would be to grab this make file and move it into our project. So we will go in here and let's create a new file, call it make, and then we will paste this. The only change we need to do here is to make sure that we have the right name for our project. And then we need to make this file executable. Right, so now we have the make file ready. The next step is to get the right project YAML file. So if you go in the templates folder I have in here, I have one for every version of React Native from 0.62.0. We can create for earlier than that, but these are just easier with like all the CocoaPods integration. Right, so the demo project for me is using 62.2, so we'll just grab that. Let's copy this and move it over to our project, and we can see what it actually has in there. All right, so I will make a project YAML file, paste everything in here, and then we can go up here and see what's up. So the first comment is just the version of Xcode Gen I used to generate that. The name is the name of our project, so in this case it's demo project. All of these settings are basically settings that React Native template has by default. So basically I just copied them over in the form of Xcode Gen. Then we have also some settings for the compiler and for the linker and all the stuff. All of these you don't really need to care. This is more some things that the React Native init template has. Yeah, we don't need to mess too much with this unless there's like a specific problem. Then the next important thing is the targets. So the targets we can see here is the application that we will generate basically. So again, we need to make this or name it correctly. So for us, it would be a demo project. It's an application for iOS, and the sources, the native source files are in the demo project. We can see this if we open our files here. We can see that in the demo project, iOS, here we have the demo project which has the native files. So that's why this comes here. After that, again, we have some things that the React Native template has, some build scripts. We don't need to change much here besides the names. So after I've saved this, the next step we can see here is basically to run the make script. So let's do that and see what happens. So I will run make, and we see that it's using Xcode Gen to generate. Then it's using pod install to link everything. And as the last step, it will also run xunique to make sure that the project file is simpler to diff, basically. So if we come in our Git application here, you can see that as the main change is adding the make file, adding the project, the YAML file. Then we have a couple of small things from Xcode that we don't really need to care about. It's just Xcode versions generate this file slightly differently, but these are basically, we can just commit them. And then as the last thing, we will see the project file here has a lot of changes. A lot of changes that, like before, is, for example, just the IDs changing, things moving around. So the first time we run this, we will have a lot of diffs happening here. But if I, for example, stage this, the next time I run this, we should have much fewer, or maybe not even any diffs at all. All right, so it's generating. And let's see the diffs now. So we have some diffs, and as you can see, it's basically, again, not really any changes, just moving things around. Unfortunately, this we cannot avoid right now because xunique is a little bit old, so it hasn't updated everything. But this is simple enough to understand that nothing has changed, then we can go ahead and commit this. So as the next step, let's go to our Xcode project and run it again and make sure that it actually works. We can see here that the names of the files or not the names, but the sorting of the files has changed, just because xunique is also sorting everything. All right, and as we can see, it builds normally and it runs again, and we have our application like before. Right, so as one last step, let's go and change. We will see this in a little bit. Okay, let's go back to our presentation. Right, so we just saw basically how to install or integrate Xcode Gen in a new project or in a project that we already have. Adding new libraries after we have added Xcode Gen, it requires a little bit of change, as we will see. For libraries that don't have any native code, like for example Ramda or Lodash or anything like that, nothing changes. We just run yarn add and then the package name and everything is done. Adding libraries with some native code, for example React Native permissions, for this we need to change slightly what we do. Before we were doing yarn add and then the package name, and then we would go into the iOS directory and run pod install to make the linker run. Now what we have to do is replace pod install with running the make file. The make file, like we said, is going to generate the Xcode project, and then it will also run pod install. So basically it just makes sure that everything will be correctly generated. We can also see a commit here that I have that I made in a demo project. So in this commit, I'm adding the permissions library and using it. So I have some changes in the app.js, which we don't need to care about. And the first step was to add the React Native permissions. After yarn install, of course, I have the changes in yarn lock. Then React Native permissions also need some changes in the pod file, which I did, and then also in the plist file. So after I have done these two, my next step was to go in iOS directory, run the make file, and that generated the new Xcode project file. So we can see that here we have some changes, but again, nothing, not as crazy as we used to get. And we can see that the name, for example, up here is check pods manifest, and here it's the start packager. And then a little bit further down, we have start packager and check pod manifest. So we can see that basically, again, some of the code just swapped places in the file. Unfortunately, we can't completely remove this, but we see that only these parts changed and not all of the IDs in this file, basically. And then, of course, the make file, part of it is running the pod install. So this generated a new pod log file. So again, yeah, adding libraries with some native code is requires a little bit of a change, but not a big one. As the last step, we can add a library by basically adding native code ourselves. So to do that, basically, again, not many things change, but it does have a little bit of a change. So we would need to create some native files with or without Xcode in that case. So that becomes a little bit easier if we want to not use Xcode for this. And then we need to just make sure that the target sources in our project YAML file are the directory that our new code lives in. So I have a commit here. Let's open this. Again, in the same project file, I have added some native code. So these are my files for the native code. It's just a view basically that has blue background, very simple. And we can see that it lives in my project, iOS directory, and then the name of my project, and then the file. So I made these using Xcode, but I didn't have to. And then the next step would be to add the JavaScript code for it. This is the file where I'm exposing the native component to JavaScript land. And then here is where I'm actually using it to test if it works. And then as the last part is, like we saw here, is to again run the make file. And the make file will generate the Xcode project. And again, as we can see, like it added the references to the new files. Again, it has swapped these two scripts. Not too bad because we can see that the main changes are basically up here, adding the native files for us. All right, let's go to the next slide. Right, so how would we upgrade our project the next time there is a new React Native version? The easiest way would be to go to this repo and grab the latest template. So if we go here, like I showed before, there's the templates directory, and in here, whenever there's a new version of React Native, a new file will appear here. Most of these have very small changes between versions. Specifically, for example, for all 62, they are the same, and for 63, it has a couple of lines changed, and then everything in 63 is the same again. If you don't want to do that and you want to make the change yourself, we could do this by looking at the upgrade helper. So we can see if there's anything interesting. So this is a little bit vague, so let's go and look at this. For example, in 62.2 going to 63.0, there are a few changes. Let's ignore everything that's not the Xcode project file, as we know how to upgrade this. But we will see that, for example, there is the Xcode project file here. Let's look at the changes. So we see that one of the changes is removing the launch screen. If we have gone through this upgrade, we would already have this file removed and added the new one. So in that case, we would have to, like, the old way would be, we would have to go to Xcode, remove the old file and add the new file and make sure everything is aligned correctly. But in this case, using project YAML file, we wouldn't need to touch anything inside Xcode. We would just remove the old launch screen file, add the new launch screen file, and then run make install or the make script file. So if we scroll down here, again, we see a lot of ID changes. For this, we don't really need to care, as now they're just auto-generated and usually they stay the same. And if we go a little bit further down, we will see that there is one change here that is a little bit interesting. Let me find this directly. So there is one called iPhone OS deployment target, and this changed from 9.0 to 10.0. This change, normally we would have to do through Xcode in the Xcode UI, but now we can more easily do this with Xcode Gen. So again, in the demo file, in the demo project I did the upgrade to 63, and let's see what changed. I made all the changes in the native files. Like I said, I removed this file, I added this file just with my code editor, and then I run the make script, and before running the make script, this is what I changed here in the project file. I changed the deployment target for iOS from 9 to 10, and only with that change, running the make script, it generated the new Xcode project file for me. So I didn't have to do anything in Xcode, and I get automatically the removing of the old file, adding of the new file, and then we can also see further down that the iOS deployment target also changed to 10. And basically that is also the change in the repo that I have made here. So this project YAML file for 63, you will see that it has 10. So it's very easy to just grab the template file from the repo, but if you want to do it yourself, you just need to find the right project YAML name and change it. So as my takeaways, Xcode Gen is great to keep all these complicated updates or upgrades a little bit more simpler. So when we have the change like we saw before, and then we have to make a guide basically to help people unfamiliar with Xcode go and do the right changes, it would require a lot of like clicking around Xcode's UI and trying to figure out where everything is. Whereas with the package YAML file, we can just do a change same as we saw before, just basically changing something in the YAML file, and then have the Xcode project generated, and then everything is exactly as it should. So that makes things much simpler. The second takeaway is Xcode Gen has great documentation. You should go check this out if you want to make your own project YAML file or want to have any customizations on it, you should go to the repo and look at all the project specification that I have, all of the documents. The code is also very simple, so whenever I find something or I can't find something in their documentation, looking at the code is also very, very simple. The third and last thing is that Xcode Gen right now doesn't have a way to generate a project YAML file from an existing Xcode project. So basically the other way around that I showed here. But this is something that is being worked on. So whenever this is out, in theory, we could have a React Native Xcode project, and then we would run Xcode Gen, like reverse generate, and then we would get a project YAML file, and we could just keep that as our package.json, like I said, and we can just customize that where we have already, instead of starting from an empty file from scratch and generate it ourselves. That means that basically whenever there's an Xcode change in a new React Native version, we need to like we did before, we need to find the interesting change, so this like iOS deployment target, for example, and find the right YAML file, the right YAML name for the project YAML file. But a way easier way would be to just go to the repo that I showed and just grab the latest template file for our React Native version that we want to upgrade to. There is some work to be done still, and this is to basically keep the templates up to date. This is not very hard, thankfully. The way that everything works is that React Native has a new version, and when that happens, there are all the diffs generated. When we have the diffs, these diffs go to the upgrade helper, and then we can see everything whenever we want to go from any version to any version. And when we look at these differences, these diffs, the next step would be to look for these interesting changes, like I said, and put these into the project YAML file. So in theory, if you have Xcode Gen in your project, and there's a new version out, you could just grab the latest template file, and that would basically require you to do no changes for your Xcode project file from upgrade helper. You would just run the make script, and all of the changes would be there. So like we said in the beginning, the project YAML file is your package.json. Your make file is basically yarn install, and then your Xcode project file is just your log file. You don't really need to care what's in there. You just need to commit it and have it so you can actually use it in another computer. Same as with the yarn log file. The second part of the work that needs to be done is that I would like to make an RFC and a PR for adding Xcode Gen in React Native, so we could have it in the init template. So my suggestion would be go to the repo I showed, try to add Xcode Gen in your project. Make issues if you find something that's not working for your specific project, or any other like more general problem. And you can also find me on Twitter, and I would like to fix this and make it as general as possible, so I can also add it in React Native template. And finally, thank you so much. I have some links here to this talk, to the template repo that I showed, where I work, some personal stuff, blah, blah. Thank you so much, and have a nice evening.